Should you return to where you came from? While this message is necessarily geared towards answering the question, hopefully it can help you discern what your motives are for wanting to return to where you came from. I did a message recently and I spoke about the prodigal son, how he hit hard times and decided to return to his father's house. Even if it meant being a servant in his father's house, no longer a son but a servant, because he hit hard times. I think a part of the message was no one has to let you back in to something either they put you out of or you walked away from, even though the person has forgiven you. So why did the son want to return home? Because sometimes it seems so much easier, and not only easier, but better, to return from whence we came. And this message, as tentatively labeled, Retrograde Roadblock, and refers to when our journey in life, our faith hits a roadblock, and we have to make decisions. Do we try to push on through the roadblock, go around it, or do we need to return from whence we came? But if we decide to go back, what are we going back to? And the question is, are we going back because it's the best course of action? It's the best place for us to be? Or are we simply going back to familiarity? I did in messages before that if a person is doing navigation and the person goes off track, one of the best things to do is to backtrack to a known point where a person can say, okay, I can look at a map and I know this is where I am. And especially before GPS, but I know this is where I am. Let me re-plot my course. Because sometimes you may have a child who leaves home, but then the child comes back because maybe the child wasn't fully prepared for what was out there. And the child comes back home, resets, and then redeploys, if you will. But for some people, when they hit a roadblock, they want to go back to where they came from. Because this also applies to you. For example, if someone walked away from you and now the person wants to come back, you need to know, why does the person want to come back? Does the person want to come back because the person realizes that you are his or her best option? Or the person just want to come back to somewhere familiar? Does the person want to just come back and do what they call a monkey bar? Maybe the person came out of a relationship. Now the person want to hold back onto you. And when something or someone who's seemingly better comes along, the person's going to leave again. So you need to discern why a person wants to come back to you, if that's the case. But this is not only about relationships. It could apply to a person want to go back to an old job. What, the new job is difficult, so now you want to go back? Is it best for you to go back, or should you keep on pushing? So again, these are the kind of questions people on both sides of the equation need to analyze. In the book of Hosea, I also mentioned this in a recent message, but I'm just going to give one verse. In Hosea 2, and this was after Hosea 1, where the Lord told Hosea to go marry a promiscuous woman, a woman of whoredoms. They had children, but then she left. And in Hosea 2, verse 7, it reads, "And she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them, and she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than now." So she came to a juncture, a point where she was saying it was better being with her husband than things are now. But what if the husband's like, who are you again? Actually, you know what? When you left, I cried myself to sleep every night for 2 weeks. But after that, the Lord's like, how long will you mourn for this woman? And I got up, like in 1 Samuel 16, and I dusted myself off, and I moved on. And after a while, I realized that life was absolutely better off without you. What do you have to offer me that I can't do without? Now, I know what I said could be harsh words. So the woman, because she hit hard times, she wanted to return to her husband. Does that mean her husband should welcome her with open arms? Also in the case with Hosea, the Bible doesn't say that Gomer divorced him, simply that Gomer left him. And under those circumstances, Gomer was still Hosea's wife, even though she had been unfaithful. On the law of Moses, he could have written a writ of divorcement, Deuteronomy 24, and send her away. Or since she returned after being adulterous, but the Lord had something to do with this because it represented how Israel would walk from the Lord. But he gave him a chance. So with Hosea's wife, she met hard times. Pursuing her lovers was not working out. And that was what brought her home. So if someone's coming home to you, what does the person want to return? If someone quit the job you're employing him or her to do, and another person wants to come back, why should you give the person another chance? Again, this is separate from forgiveness. It doesn't mean that you have forgiven a person. Because sometimes a person walks away, and maybe you didn't miss the person at all, because maybe someone you're looking for an opportunity to fire. And by the person walking away, the person did you a massive favor. And the person's absence shows that his or her presence was not needed. The person was more trouble than he or she was worth. So again, it's a two-sided equation. Why do you want to return? And for the other person, why would you want to let this person back in? So what was Hosea's wife returning to? Would it be better, or would it just be familiar? Well, in this case, it seems as if it would be better. But here's another one. In Numbers 11, the Israelites, after the Lord delivered them from several hundred years or a few hundred years of slavery in Egypt, and he was taking them to the wilderness en route to the promised land, feeding them with manna. In Numbers 11 verses 4 through 9 it reads, "And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes." And it continues, "And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof was as the color of bdellium. And the people went out and gathered it, and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar, and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it." Let me take a little pit stop here. It describes the manna as being the color of bdellium, or dillium. And the people went out, gathered it, ground it in mills, beat in mortar, baked in pans, and made cakes of it. And we're seeing something about manna appearing in the Bible. In the very scripture, I guess Numbers 11, about manna. I'm gonna hold up. Those look like Ritz crackers, kind of crumbled, as opposed to manna. Oh boy. I'm like, that is not what manna looks like. This part of discernment. How do things correlate to the Bible? I continue. So they made cakes of it, and the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. So again, the manna was as coriander seed. The Israelites, they were in the wilderness, and they fell a lusting, and they talked about the fish, which they ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, and onions, and garlic. In that case, what the Israelites were lusting after, what they want to return to, was it better or simply familiar? I mentioned before that deliverance, in a sense, takes place in a 4-step process. And sometimes it takes place all at once. But in a 4-step process, akin to when the Lord delivered the children from Egypt. Step 1, delivering them out of Egypt. Step 2, delivering them from the Egyptians. That's when the enemy was crushed. Where Moses said, the enemy you see today, you will see no more. Step 3, in the wilderness, delivering them from the Egyptian mindset. And step 4, delivering them into the promised land. Deliverance from the Egyptian mindset. Do you know how offensive this was? After God did all those wonderful things to deliver them out of Egypt and the hand of the Egyptians, for them to want to go back. In Exodus 3, the Lord spoke to Moses, how because he heard the cries of his children in Egypt, that he was going to send Moses to Egypt to deliver them. They were in slavery. They were being afflicted. But now in their minds, they forgot about the slavery. They forgot about the work they were doing. But now they're remembering the fish, the leeks, the onions, the melons. This is why for some people, some ex or person you used to be in a relationship with shows up and wants to give it another shot and talk about how wonderful things were. And you're thinking, has this person lost his or her mind? Maybe for 2 seconds it was wonderful, but we fought like cats and dogs. We were unequally yoked. We were this or that. But in that person's mind, oh, it was so wonderful. By the way, they were in the wilderness. So kind of like Hosea's wife, how hard times came upon her, and she's like, it was better for her to be with her husband. Hard times came upon the Israelites, and now they're talking about, oh, it was better for us in Egypt. Was anyone whipping them in the wilderness? Was it so bad being under the Lord's protection? So why did the Israelites want to return to Egypt? Was it better or simply familiar? And there's a thing about people being comfortable while uncomfortable. People get comfortable in their misery. So for some relationships, one person's talking about how good it was, and another person's like, oh no, it wasn't. I remember. That is not something that needs to be revisited. So the people, sometimes their motives are wrong. Because they start experiencing hard times, they want to go back into a situation. And not because going back would be better, in a sense, for all parties concerned. Because that should be a part of the equation. Would it be better for all parties involved? They want to go back because they reach a point where things are so difficult that they would much rather turn back than to continue going in the direction. Again, there are times when people are going in a direction that's wrong, and they need to change course. But for others, they only want to go back because what they're going through right now is viewed as being so difficult that they'd much rather go back into a worse situation because right now it seems comfortable. Do you know how many people went back into a situation because in their minds, or maybe some devil was putting in their mind, that they were better off where they were? and they went back in that situation, and now they're begging the Lord to deliver them. So if you're thinking about going back into a situation, into a position, why do you want to go back? Is it because it is what is best for you? Or is it because it is what is familiar? Is the Lord telling you to go back? Because the Lord did not deliver the children of Israel out of Egypt for them to go back into bondage. The Lord doesn't set people free for them to go back to the bondage that they came out of. In 2 Peter 2, it ends by saying about not being like a dog that returns to its own vomit, or a sow that's been washed that returns to the mire. Jesus said, whom the Son makes free is free indeed. He came to set the captives free. So wanting to go back, examine why. Is God leading you back? Or is it because where you came from, it may have been absolutely miserable, was slightly better, in your opinion, than what you're going through now? For women who've had children, before the baby starts crowning, you have labor pains. But in the process of birthing, do you want to stop, or do you want to push through and get the baby out? And for some people, they reach a point where they can give birth to a promise from the Lord, if you will. And that's the point they want to go back and they want to quit. So Hosea's wife going back seemed like a good thing. But with the Israelites want to go back into Israel or want to go back into Egypt, it wasn't a good thing. It was simply familiar. And that's where they want to go back to. What was familiar instead of what was good. And there are many people that want to go back into a situation, but that is not the direction the Lord wants them to go to. And by the way, if you're someone who either you put another person out or the other person left, and now you realize that the Lord does not want the relationship to be reconstituted, no matter how much that person or any other individual tries telling you how good it was or how good it could be, obey the Lord. And in the final example, regarding wanting to return, is it because it's what is best, meaning what is godly, or is it simply because it is familiar? In the book of Ruth, and I'll read from verses 6 through 17. Naomi lived with her husband, and in Bethlehem, Judah, there was a famine, so they moved to Moab. Their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, married two women, Ruth and Orpah. Naomi's husband and two sons passed away. And she heard that there was prosperity back in Bethlehem, Judah. So she decided to go home and take her two daughters-in-law with her. So it picks up. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she heard that in the country of Moab, how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she sent forth out of the place where she was, and her daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. I didn't see this coming. So they left Bethlehem, Judah, because times were hard. They went to Moab, and now they're going to go back to Bethlehem, Judah, because she heard the Lord had visited and was giving them bread. For some people, someone left you, or others left you, because things got hard. And there are times when things got hard because they caused the hardship. And now they hear how the Lord is blessing you. And they want to come back to reap some of the blessings. And there are times you can share blessings with people. And there are times like, you will have no parts of this inheritance. Because if you left during hard times, more than likely, you leave again when things get hard, when things are no longer pleasing to you. And then for some people, they're messengers of Satan. The devil knows you're getting blessed, and he's going to try to send someone to cut off those blessings. So be careful. Just ensure the Spirit of God is leading you. So they want to go back. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead, and with me. The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and lifted up her voice, and they lifted up their voice, and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will ye go with me? And there are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. If I say, I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, will ye tarry for them till they were grown? Will ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. That's like Naomi was saying, there's nothing I can do for you. No more children in her womb. Even if she were to have get a husband on that night and have sons, will they wait for those sons to grow up? It looked bleak. Again, be careful of those who only want to be with you or around you when things are going well. And the moment things start looking dry, they're going to walk away from you. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. So we see choices. Naomi wanted to return home. Not only because it was familiar, it was also prosperous. So Ruth and Orpah, they had a choice to make. They both had the same choice. Orpah made it. And as Naomi stated, Orpah chose to return to her country, to her family, and sadly, to her gods. What was Ruth going to do? You already know. Popular story. So Ruth and Orpah both had a decision to make. Go into the unknown, regardless how bleak things looked, or return to the familiar. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more so also, if I ought but death part thee and me. Ruth was willing to go into the unknown, to keep on pressing forward, as opposed to going back to the familiar. I've heard about the potential what happened to Orpah after she returned to Moab. But the one whose story is continued in the Bible is Ruth. She ended up meeting and marrying Boaz. They had a son named Obed. the father of Jesse, the father of David, through whom kings came. So things became difficult for Ruth. And yes, there was a period after she returned to Bethlehem, Judah with Naomi. She was gleaning from a field, like the lowest of the low. Those could have been times where she could have been like, man, I was better off in Moab. But she clung to Naomi. And it worked out for her. She could have returned to the familiar, or she could have pressed forward, which she did. And she walked straight into God's will. Because also part of the story of Ruth and Boaz, regarding the Abrahamic bloodline. Lot was Abraham's nephew. They had become parted. In Genesis 19, Lot's two daughters decided to get him drunk and sleep with him. They both became pregnant. One of those children was called Moab, the father of the Moabites. So Ruth, despite the hardships, she kept on moving forward. She didn't return to Moab because it was familiar and potentially easier. So the core of this message is check motives. Your motives, the motives of others. And then check those motives to God's will. Those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. Ensure He's one guiding you to all truth. And that you don't want to go back into a situation because it was familiar. Because familiar can be very ungodly. There's spirits that are referred to as familiar spirits. And when those spirits try plaguing a person's life, a lot of stuff is focused on pulling a person backwards, back into positions the Lord has delivered them from, back into times where it's in the past, washed away by the blood of the Lamb. So if you want to get back into a situation, or someone wants you to get back into a situation with him or her, check motives, and also check with the Spirit of God, because the Holy Spirit will guide you into all truth. So in your life, let only the Lord's will be done, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. God bless you, and Jesus the Christ is Lord.